3000.
What is doing? My name's Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. I'm joined today by an artist, a tattooist, Imogen Schlgrl. Imogen, thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me.
First up, you've got to tell us about the Schlgrl.
Yes. So Schlgrl is the tag I use for my art and tattooing at the moment. And I created it when I was basically still a schoolgirl. I actually created it when I was making jewelry out of high school. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, at the time the full name was Schoolgirl Trainwreck. And I just thought that was really cool and encapsulated everything I was doing. And although like I've stuck with it as I got older and shortened it, it's sort of becoming a little bit old now. Like I don't really feel like a schoolgirl anymore, and I feel like it's going to get more and more awkward until it maybe like flips around and becomes funny.
Until it gets to the age when it's ironic, I guess.
Yes, yeah, when I'm like 40.
It's a bit of a Tumblr-ish name.
It is, yep.
So let's start with your journey. Where did you grow up and how did you get to be a tattooist in Fitzroy, Melbourne?
Yeah, it's a big story so far. So I feel like I grew up in Sydney in the inner west.
Yep.
My dad was a priest, so I grew up in a clergy house attached to a church there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an interesting spot for anybody to grow up.
Yeah, it was really, I feel like I was in a really good position because my parents aren't super conservative, so they've been really encouraging on anything I was interested in. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we literally lived in a church and I was surrounded by church music and church artwork. So that was a huge part of my life growing up. Yeah.
And I guess even from an artistic perspective, you can't help but somewhat being influenced by that, or the opposite way, I guess.
Yes, yeah, because growing up, I mean, I love those things, and I remember I had all these books and artworks of like, I think the first sign I had something was awry. I had this book which had an artwork of Jesus nailed up on the cross and he's being stabbed and all of that. And as a kid, I was so like this artwork spun me out and I was so upset with it, but I was also really morbidly curious and like, this is gnarly.
Yeah, it's for someone who hasn't grown up religious at all, I always try and take a step back, and I think if people just invented religion now in churches, they would be like, the public would be freaked out and be like, this is actually sort of cultish and kind of fucking bizarre.
Yeah, well, that's how it felt as a kid, because when you're a kid, like you take everything at face value. And I, unfortunately, really young, I developed religious OCD because I guess like my parents, it's not even that they pushed the religion on me. It's just that it was such a huge, ever-present part of my life that I took it really seriously, and I happened to be a really intense kid.
Yep.
So it quickly developed into like every time I blink, I would pray and I would constantly believe I was extremely evil and like I had to do all these ritualistic things to avoid being evil. And
that's a lot.
Yeah.
So you would obviously you were sort of indoctrinated or brought up, I guess, to pray a lot of the time and to value a greater being and that sort of thing. So then that became such a part of you and so instilled into you that every time you would blink, you thought you had to pray? Yeah,
basically, because, you know, I was a kid, and when you're a kid, obviously you have like cheeky or naughty thoughts, just like normal kid things. Yep. But because I was constantly reading the Bible and I was involved in this stuff, I was trying to put that framework into my life and how Jesus applied to me and how, you know, the stories of the disciples applied to my life as a kid.
Wow.
And I know that even really young, I had a really inherent interest in everything spooky and Halloweeny and like devils and things. And I felt really guilty about it. I just couldn't knock it on the head. Like I still love devils and all these things, but I knew it was not allowed.
Is that you think that was just instilled in you, or do you think that was pushing against the normality of what your upbringing was?
I feel like it's hard to say because I really don't feel like anything was pushed on me. I just feel like I took everything really intensely as a kid.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It was just like whenever I watched TVs or something, if there was a spooky character, I was immediately really into it. Mm-hmm. And I just had this feeling inside me that like, that's wrong. You shouldn't do that. You should be all about Jesus.
Yeah, wow. That's a crazy way to grow up. So then do you start to practice your own art? Is that where you feel like that's a release to let this sort of these feelings for that sort of stuff out, or how are you exploring that?
Yeah, so this was all sort of going on, and then also sort of my family home growing up was really chaotic. And because we lived on the church, our house was sort of like public property, so we often had strangers walking around, or like my dad used to house drug addicts and stuff in our house.
Inside your own house?
Yes.
Wow.
So there was always like crazy stuff going on, and I feel like, I was like, as a kid, my way of, I guess, processing everything and coping and going into my own world was to start to like, I would like build little doll houses or draw little characters. I made characters and comics for everything.
So you created your own world to remove yourself from your actual world.
Yeah, like I feel like out of all my siblings, I was the most sort of like in my own mind kid. I didn't like playing with other kids, or I didn't really want to engage with other people. I just wanted to sit on my own and think about things or imagine.
And that must be really tough when you're in a place that, like you said, is essentially public property. And I'm guessing when the church is in service and when there's Sunday school and when there's all this sort of stuff, all the kids are going to be there and you just want to be by yourself.
Yeah, 100%. It was like that too. Like there was always kids on our property or in our house, or it was a very like, it's fantastic to have the church where it's a really connected community and no one's alone. But for me as like an introverted kid, I was like, I can't wait to just sit on my own and like play in my own zone.
Yeah. And there was no safe space in your house where you could just get away from, like the kids and the people aren't going to come in there. You could be on your own room or anything.
Yeah, I suppose I had my own room. Like I shared a room with my brother growing up for a long time. But I did sort of have my own little corner with, I would like build all these worlds out of cardboard boxes or have all my things there. So
yeah, that's a super interesting place to grow up. We haven't had anyone on the show yet that grew up in a church. So how was school for you? I'm guessing you went to somewhere that was a religious school as well?
Actually, no. Like this, what I mean about my parents, they weren't super religious outside of being so connected to the church. Mm-hmm. I went to a normal primary school as far as I remember, same as my high school. They were sort of like lower income schools. There was like a wide diversity of people.
Mm-hmm. Lots of different ethnicities, lots of different backgrounds, lots of different religions, I'm guessing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And is that where you sort of start, like obviously you're making your own worlds, you're drawing, you're developing characters. Does this start to, in high school, you said that you started making jewelry, you're starting to do things on a more of a level that you think this could be a career path?
Yeah, like I think I can always say that art was sort of the only thing I was interested in. And I feel like heaps of artists, or especially like tattooists, share this experience of like school was not super great for them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I definitely had trouble just socially connecting to other kids, or I just had a lot of trouble with social things in general, like cues or maintaining relationships. So for me, drawing was like the number one interesting thing to be doing.
And so that's something that we now would sort of say is a spectrum related thing. But at that point in time, was that something that was diagnosed or even talked about?
Yeah. So when I was younger, this is the crazy thing. It was brought up because I had problems. Like I had a lot of things like problems with eye contact. I was having meltdowns in school a lot, and not connecting to other kids. And it was brought up, and I did get tested. But the thing is that like with people born female, they didn't start researching like specifically female autism until sort of like really recently.
Really?
Yeah.
So they thought autism was solely a male thing.
It's more like they just used male subjects to sort of base their research around. And they've done, I've forgotten what the study's called now, but I got really into it, where they did a playground study pretty recently about boys and girls really young on the playground with autism. And what they figured out is that it was really easy by their current diagnostic criteria for them to pick out the autistic boys and be like, yes, they fit into the category. But for girls, they sort of, the way it manifested was that young girls are like chameleons, and the way that like usually female social games work in a like.
Sorry, we've got a fly. This is probably one reason why we don't open the window. But anyway, sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry, forgive
Just
us. No. That's the female. Yeah, sorry.
Well, basically, they figured out that because like female children tend to have like different types of games they play and their social structure is different, that the female children with autism were able to sort of be chameleons and blend in quite well.
Yeah, for lack of a better term, I guess they would sit down and be quieter more than the boys that were running around. Is that sort of what they were kind of thinking?
Yeah, I think one of the conclusions of the paper was that boys had a lot of focus on like competitive games or sporty games that really like segregated the autistic children out.
Yep.
Whereas girls' games were really, they would rapidly change and they would be social games or family games and this kind of game. And for autistic girls, although they still struggled with a close connection, they were able to sort of jump between social circles and blend in, which is how I felt as a kid.
Yeah, I guess, and that disguises what their condition might be, I guess, more from the teachers and educators, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I sort of got officially tested as a kid, and I mean, what my mum said is they said no, she's not autistic, and that was that. But I sort of grew up and I was really confused. I thought there's something wrong, like I don't feel normal. And it took getting all the way into adulthood. And I mean, I've been seeing psychologists since I was like 10. So it was like an ongoing process. And then I think just recently in like the last 4 years that came up again. And my last 2 psychs I was seeing are pretty adamant on like, yes, you are on the spectrum.
But look, it's a spectrum. So,
Yeah.
and like as they say, everybody's on the spectrum to a degree. It's just, where you sit on that spectrum.
Yeah, I think like I'm not a huge person about labels. I think the most helpful thing about a label is being able to connect to a community of like-minded people and to be able to say, yes, like these things might apply to me and I should look into them.
Yeah. It's super interesting though, like you said, that they were their test cases were boys and they were finding it easier to find boys because of these certain traits. And I guess that sort of goes to show that maybe boys and girls at a young age do learn things differently and do have different practices and that sort of thing,
Yeah, and we've been watching, me and my partner have been watching another program recently which sort of delves into the life of children that age between 5 and 9. And what they were talking on about there as well is that that's sort of the age that children begin to self-segregate. Like they get into their specific groups of I'm a girl, I'll hang with girls. And so I think that's why there's this differentiation of like girl games and boy games and girl social groups. I don't know if that's like, I feel it's less a case of you're born that way versus like this is the age you start to look around and see what you should be doing.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. That's I guess you start to become more aware of your surroundings and who you are and your place in the world, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, absolutely.
So whilst you're at school, they might be making a diagnosis of you, but you just feel like that's the way you are and it doesn't really matter about the label they put on it. You're just throwing yourself into your artistic stuff because you're not doing the social things that school is requesting of you, I'm guessing.
Yeah, like I definitely tried to get other kids in on whatever I was doing, but it was just sort of not always well received.
Yep.
I can't say I had zero friends. I had a few like close friends in school, but I don't know. I feel like number one was always me and myself and these little worlds I made, and yeah.
At this stage, I don't know how old you are, but I'm guessing you can find a community online as well, and you can find friends on there.
Yeah, definitely.
So that, I guess, must help because even if you are flying solo at school or whatever, you still have an online community.
Yeah. When I was young, I feel like maybe when I was 12, that's when everyone started having a cell phone as well. So things like Kik became really big where like, I think at that time I ran an anime account and I was in like 10 different role play groups and like.
There you go. So you're part of a community. It's just
Yeah.
not a physical one.
Yeah, I think having little nerdy communities like this has always been really good.
Really cool. So then, what about tattooing or the next progression? I'm guessing is the jewelry.
Yeah, so I think the first thing was that I started doing art commissions. Like this was when I had the anime account. Basically, I had what you would call like a rare name. Like I had a name that had no underscores or no numbers. So I became the official like character for this. My account became like the official account for this anime character.
Is this Kik? Are you talking about?
This was just on early Instagram actually.
Yep.
So because of that factor, I started getting a lot of followers from these similar circles. And through that, I started putting my art up.
Yep.
And because I had a lot of eyes on it, I started doing like just little commissions, like $10, and I would draw like someone's profile picture or portrait.
In an anime style.
I think at this time I was doing sort of like trying to do realism. I was doing like anime art as well, but
So ultra realistic sort of photorealism stuff.
I was trying. Yeah, I was really interested in it, but
That's hard stuff though.
yeah, I don't know if I was achieving it.
But yeah, well, it's definitely a hard way to start doing commissions, but I guess it's a cool way to get yourself out there. So that Instagram then grows into what comes next, because this is early days of Instagram when I'm guessing there's only photos. There's no real sort of like videos and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think if I remember, there wasn't videos yet. So it would be like you'd talk or chat a lot on Kik, and then you'd do a lot of your photos on Instagram.
Yeah.
If I remember.
So you needed one and the other. You weren't really communicating with people on Instagram. You're more communicating on Kik, and then you would filter them to your Instagram.
I think so. Yeah, it's a bit blurry, but like I've always been super. Pick up a lot of interests. So I was doing the art, and then, through that I would try to do a bit of sculpture or a bit of something else.
And just expand your artistic endeavors.
Yeah. Like towards the end of high school, I think I'd settled pretty heavily on just drawing. But shortly after I left high school, I became really close to this woman who was a fashion designer.
Yep.
So I think through working with her, she was like me. She would do a lot of broad stuff like drawing and sculpture and performance art and all this. So I started living with her, and through that, we would like combine our materials, and I made jewelry and things like that.
Yeah, wow. Do you want to? Can you tell us who she was?
I better not. Yeah, we actually had a big falling out.
Oh no!
And I don't want to put her name out because I don't wish any ill will to her. But yeah.
That's good of you.
Yeah.
So that sort of, and I guess she's a mentor to you at this stage. You haven't had your falling out yet, so you're learning a lot from her, and then you're sort of thinking, well, I can do artistic stuff that isn't just drawing. I can do different sort of artistic pursuits that isn't just commissions, through the Instagram and the Kik.
Yeah, so I should probably say like two things sort of happened simultaneously. Like just before I left high school, towards the end of high school, I'd gotten really into heavy music. And I think through that, like people saw that I was like this like emo looking kid who listened to metal all the time and like just drew in class and didn't do anything else. So through that, I think a few people suggested like, oh, like you should be a tattoo artist. And that was the first time I'd ever thought of this possible career. And I sort of just like latched onto it, and I couldn't think about doing anything else.
Yep.
But at that point, I sort of had no idea about how you're even meant to become a tattoo artist. Like I didn't know any tattooists, and I didn't have any idea about that scene.
Yeah.
So when I left high school, the first thing is I started going to a lot of metal gigs and hanging out in that scene a lot. And that was sort of happening alongside like meeting this woman and living with her.
Well, I'm guessing if you're growing up in a church, people that are in the metal scene are going to be all new friends for you. So it's a whole new way to meet people, a whole new scene, and something totally different for you. It opens up some different horizons.
I want to say yes, but also my dad, who was the priest, was a punk before he was a priest.
Oh, that's awesome. So he was like a old school punk rocker.
Yeah.
Wow. Was the church kind of cool? Like, were they doing it in like a kind of cool capacity, or was it like your run-of-the-mill kind of church?
I guess it was a little bit cool. Like it was an Anglican church, and it was very free in the sense that, like I was saying, how my dad used to house addicts. Like it was a church that accepted a lot of people who didn't fit at other churches, like addicts or people recovering, or like a lot of people. Gay community and
right. Yeah, that is an interesting thing to think of now. Everybody in the gay community is accepted in pretty much any church, or most of them, but I'm guessing back in the day there was certain churches that wouldn't accept those sort of people from that lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely.
And your dad was pretty early to that sort of acceptance and sort of saying everyone's got a spot here.
Yeah, my dad is really I would say one thing about him, he's always been interested in sort of the minority communities in Sydney. So it's like he changes his focus around a lot, but he'll get really obsessed with one topic, like, sort of how the gay community is doing in Sydney, or like the Muslim community is his current focus, and he tries to create a bridge between that and the current Christian church.
Oh, that's awesome. So, and if he's pretty open-minded, I guess he's going to be cool with you wanting to go down the tattooist route in that early days of school.
Yeah, I think he never showed me his music or anything growing up. Like I had seen a few pictures around of him with like his chains and his motorcycle, but I sort of came into metal music on my own. And then he was like, "Oh, you like this too," and started like showing me all his music and stuff.
Awesome. We're going to get rid of this fly.
It's really interested in me.
I'm worried that if it gets close to the mic, we're just going to get like a...
Yeah, it's so
Maybe I'll open this
persistent.
up and we'll just...
Did it? It might have gone out.
Yeah, it's like the one time that I open up a window. It's just... Yeah.
Yeah.
I was hoping to just grab him because he was just...
Do you think he went out? Because he doesn't look like he's around anymore.
It was in this corner left this door.
Yeah.
I feel like you're good.
Cool. It's really cool that your dad, like, a lot of people would be like, oh, they're Muslims, we're not going to worry about them in that because they're different cultural sort of, religions and stuff. It's really cool that he's about, like, trying to bring people together and all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I think he's good. All right. So we've established that your dad is one of the cooler members of the church. So
he actually got kicked out of the church.
Can you talk about
Yeah.
that? Yeah. So what happened?
My dad is a really complicated person. Like I love him to death, but he's in his own world, a lot like me, but he takes it to an extreme, I guess. I absolutely love him, but he's sort of really driven in his own goals. And sometimes those goals have aligned with the church and been really positive for the church. And I think he made a lot of headway in like connecting the Muslim church and sort of like he brought a lot of refugees to Sydney. I remember from Sierra Leone through using the church's power.
Yep.
But there's sort of been other times where, like for example, he got divorced twice, I believe, while he was in the church. And a lot of aspects with his personal life sort of clashed with the bigger diocese beliefs.
Yeah. And it's a shame that the church can't see past that and realise that he's doing the right thing and what happens in his personal life is really irrelevant to the work he might be doing within the organisation.
Yeah, this is true. I do have a little, not sympathy, I do understand their point because with my dad, sort of his personal life is his work.
Yeah.
So there's been times where like when my parents divorced, it was on a current affair. Like it got really big and messy.
Wow. Okay. And the church doesn't want that kind of smoke, I guess.
Yeah, and my dad's always been my dad for good or bad. Like if he thinks something that's completely controversial to everyone else, he'll go full force ahead with it. He won't let anyone tell him.
Well, maybe it's probably for the best that he isn't hamstrung with an organisation like that he can be doing his own thing if that's the kind of work he wants to do.
Yeah, I think where he's at now, it's probably a really positive thing for him to just have his own business and be like running that, I guess, because I feel like towards the end of his time in the church, a lot of the community members sort of got strung along with all the different dramas happening. And
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people were just a bit tired of it, yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Well, that's pretty interesting. Let's get back to your personal journey. So after you leave school and you've got your sort of mentor, then you think about, all right, I want to get into tattooing, and then so you sort of look at avenues to do that and take your drawings onto the skin.
Yeah, so the first thing I started doing about tattooing was that I would just go to different libraries and find all of the books they had regarding tattooing and just read through them. And then at this time, like I couldn't afford to buy the books, but I would like go to different bookstores and just sit in there for hours and hours and read like anything about the history or different cultures. Because I remember when I first sort of went into a tattoo shop and got tattooed for the first time, I brought that up to the artist. I was like, I'm really interested in this. I really want to know how I can get into it. And he was sort of not dismissive, but he was like, oh, you need to know more. Like you need to learn about tattoo.
And that's credit to him because that is, I think, what you do need to do. Like I think a lot of people now buy a machine on Amazon and they think they're ready to go. But one thing you've got to do with anything is learn the history, I believe.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like it's one of those jobs where it seems really cool from the offset. So a lot of people are like, I want to do this, and they think of it more as a hobby. Whereas like the more I read and the more I researched, the more I was like, this is a full lifetime thing.
Yeah, and you've got to respect a culture that's been around for a long time, and the people that paved the way. And I think all that's really important, not just in tattooing, but in any artistic or potential job that you're going to do.
Yeah.
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 So now that you've had that little lesson from the person that gave you your first tattoo, do you think, okay, I'm going to dive in right now. I'm going to go and learn everything, and I'm going to really make a go of this and apply yourself?
Yeah, I was really set on getting a traditional apprenticeship. So I had like a lot of the friends I was around at that time were like, well, why don't you just get a machine and start doing it? Like, you're really good at drawing. You should just start doing tattoos now. And I thought, no, I really want to get a traditional apprenticeship, and I don't want to do anything before I do that. But actually getting it was really hard. Like, what I thought at the time, I had learned a lot, and I put together a portfolio, but I was a bit shy to take it into places. And I remember I walked by another tattoo studio in the city, and I thought I'll just pop in and try to like maybe talk to the artists in there. And there was an older guy at the counter, I think was the owner, and he was really rude to me. Like, he sort of just treated me like a stupid chick and was like, you don't know anything, like, don't even come back in here. So that sort of scared me off just trying to talk to tattooists for a while.
Yep.
So I sort of got stuck in that sort of introverted phase of like, I'll just keep perfecting my portfolio and reading more and perfecting. And
Yeah. So next time you go in there, you can sort of hold your own sort of thing.
yeah, 100%. Like, I wanted to be really prepared, which is funny because when I finally did end up going back into the shop I would get an apprenticeship in, I was such a mess that I like snotted all over their front counter.
What, you were nervous?
I was so nervous. It was at the time I was working at a paint and sip place, like teaching people how to paint. And I'd asked my boss at that place for a promotion, and she denied it. And she was like, seems like you don't even want to be here. Like, what do you really want to do? And I said, well, I'm passing time until I can get into tattooing. And there was a shop next door to us, so she literally like grabbed me by the wrist and walked me right in. And I didn't have my portfolio or anything, so I started having a panic attack actually. And when I panic, I freeze, so I couldn't speak or talk. I had my hand up like this.
Oh, no.
And she walked me in like she's my mom, and she's like, this is Imogen. She's a really good artist, and she wants a job here. And they were like, is that true? And they gave me a thing to write my Instagram name on. And as I was writing it, I was crying, and I snotted everywhere on the table. And my boss just gave me tissues and was like, clean yourself up.
And they gave you a job?
They called me back in for an interview. And when I came back for the interview, I was like, I have to compensate for what happened when I went in there last time. So I had my hair all spiked to the ceiling and have like, I don't know, just a way different aura. I was really confident. I was like, I have this job. I have my portfolio this time. And I just got in there and told them everything I know. And yeah, they hired me.
And so that's where you went on to start your apprenticeship and finish your apprenticeship?
Yeah. So this was when I had moved to Melbourne from Sydney, because I'd sort of gotten scared off Sydney and didn't want to try anymore. I thought people in Melbourne would be a lot nicer, and they were.
Yeah. So literally because of that one shop you went into, or not that, but I guess that's a straw that broke the camel's back.
It was, yeah.
You thought, fuck it, I'm going to Melbourne where people are more accepting.
Yeah, and again, sort of with this simultaneous thing of me living with this fashion designer at that time, she was going to move to Melbourne as well. And she wanted me to help her start her store in Melbourne. And unfortunately, we had this huge falling out just before the move. So I sort of decided like, well, fuck it, I'll just move on my own and do this tattoo thing.
I guess she planted the seed, or you've already had in your head, I'm going to Melbourne, so yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And so on your personal journey at this stage, and we've sort of touched on it briefly, but you're non-binary, so are you, at this stage, are you, is this part of who you are to openly to people yet, or are you still at a point where you're identifying as female to potential workplaces?
Yeah, definitely identifying as female at that point. Like, sort of, I try not to jump all over the place too much, but I probably have to go back a little bit of when I started hanging out in the metal scene. Like in high school, sort of the first feelings I'd had thoughts here and there of like, I wish I was a guy. I don't really feel like a girl. But it's sort of there was so much other shit going on in school that I sort of put that on the back burner. And then when I started getting out, because I went to an all-girls high school.
Yep. Oh, but it was a public all-girls high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was like it was an all-girls school with none of the benefits of a private school. But when I went out into the real adult world and suddenly like I had male colleagues and male friends.
I often found that personally growing up, when you'd meet girls that had been to an all-girls school, they really lacked a little bit of that interaction with the opposite sex, and there was maybe just a different sort of maturity with that as someone who went to a co-ed school personally. So I guess that's going to be a factor.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think the only experience with guys I'd had to that point was my boyfriend. So it was like if I had a guy close to me, it was in a romantic sense.
Yeah, so so you struggled to have male platonic friends, I guess, or not struggled to, but you hadn't really experienced that, and that's something you would get at a co-ed school.
Yeah, so I sort of jumped right from that to like hanging out a lot in the Sydney metal scene, and like it was really male dominated in the place I was at the time. So it was sort of like suddenly all my friends were male and all my colleagues were male, and that's when I really started to feel dissonant with like, I feel like everyone else here, but everyone else treats me like a female. And I guess at that time, because it was so male dominated, some people would really pick out that I was a girl and treat me strangely.
Right. So just so I can get my head around it, are they giving you more attention because you're a female when there's a lot of males there, or are they treating you like you don't belong?
Probably the latter. Like, I don't think it was intentional, but like I had a boyfriend at that time and sort of I was always referred to as such and such as girlfriend. Even if I knew the guy for way back before he even met my boyfriend, suddenly it was like, oh, well, you're his property and I can't hug you, I can't touch you. You don't belong in the mosh pit. When I was younger, I always try to compensate. So I would go into every pit and be super aggressive and I would have people just literally pick me up by the waist and put me out.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess it was the first time that I realized, like, oh, I have a different social role than I feel like I should have.
Okay, and that makes you think, okay, well, maybe, I don't fit in these sort of gender stereotypes. That's the first time when you started to think like that?
Yeah, that's the first time I started to really feel upset about it. Like, it was constantly on my mind. And I'd started cross-dressing, and it sort of became a thing that was really comforting to me. Like, if I had something going on in my life, I didn't understand it at the time, but I would just go through phases where I needed to cross-dress all the time and I needed to present as manly as I could. And I noticed it coincided around, like, if I needed surgery and I was nervous about it, suddenly I would start cross-dressing again.
Yeah. But it's not something you wanted to, or you didn't always feel the need to be masculine. You just felt like there was phases where you were, but was there phases when you were feminine as well?
Yeah, probably. Like, I think that was the confusing thing for me, and that was sort of the stage I was still at when I got to Melbourne and started my apprenticeship, where I was like, well, I'm female, that's how everyone sees me, but when I go home and after work, I want to dress as a male and look as a male, and like all my online presence is masculine. And
right. And that was something that you felt that your potential employer was not ready to handle, that sort of knowledge?
It was sort of like at that time, I just thought like, this is a weird quirk about me. I didn't really know what non-binary was. And I sort of knew about like trans people, but I didn't feel like I was in the position to commit a full social or medical transition.
No, and that is understandable. And I guess you probably feel that you're a little bit of an outsider already being a female in this apprenticeship situation. So to add anything else that's going to confuse the potential employers more, you just think, I don't want to confuse the situation?
Yeah. I mean, like when I started, I don't know how true this is, but I heard that they originally didn't want to hire me because I was female and they already had one female artist out of like 5 men. And they thought that's too many.
Yeah. And I know it sounds crazy, but I think a lot of places, not just tattoo, but they, even trades and stuff, they feel like we don't need multiple of these, we don't need to have this gender balance, which is crazy now because times have changed. Even in the last 10 years, things have changed.
Things have changed really quickly.
Yeah. So that's sort of where you're at. You do your apprenticeship. Is Melbourne the place that you thought it would be? It's more welcoming. You feel more at home. Is it like, okay, this is where I sort of fit in and where I can start my tattooing career?
Yeah, like in Sydney, I just thought I was a crazy person because like every time I went outside, people were like, oh, what are you wearing? You look so weird. You're a weirdo. And when I came to Melbourne, it was just like everyone's already doing what I'm doing. Like I'm not special.
You're like, I'm normal here.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there is scenes in Sydney where people are a lot more themselves, but I guess here people don't ask the questions as much and they just accept everybody. That's your personal style. That's the way you are. And I guess you feel at home a little bit more.
Yeah, like, do you know, like, there's something I kind of miss about Sydney in that, like, it was so hard to have scenes like that. And, like, anytime you had a good music gig venue, it would immediately be shut down. So when you did have scenes, they were, like, really tight. And I remember, like, I don't know if it was just because I was more ingratiated with the metal scene there, but, like, I knew everything that was going on and I had really close friends and people would really get together and support each other. And then when I came to Melbourne, it's almost like there's too much choice. Like, it's so easy to have a gig or a community or like find people that like you sort of take it for granted a little bit more.
Yeah, I guess when it's a smaller scene, everybody supports each other, but here everyone's doing their own thing, so they find less time to support the others.
Yeah, and like you go to the country and the metal scenes are so beautiful there because it's like, you know, a 2-hour drive is nothing for them. If their friend's playing a show, they'll be there.
Yeah. And like any little small niche music scene or artistic scene, I think you see the true essence of what that scene's about in smaller areas because people get behind it a lot more.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like most of my friends I made at that time was because I took like a 6-hour bus trip down to see King Parrot and I met all these friends at that gig. So
Yeah, nice.
it was like just a really cool community centered around that.
Yeah, awesome. So your actual apprenticeship itself, you found that it was a good place to do your apprenticeship. Did you learn? Were you accepted as somebody from Sydney and somebody who was female in a place that they already told you that they weren't really that interested in you potentially because of your gender?
Yeah, I mean, when I started, I guess like it wasn't a traditional apprenticeship like I hoped for. I know that a lot of people in the studio, they didn't have an autoclave. There wasn't like traditional machines running. Although there was an older artist working there who sort of really took me under his wing and he showed me how to like take them apart, put them together and a lot of that knowledge.
Yep.
So I guess I was really lucky in that sense. Like I had some really fantastic artists who really showed me everything they could. But then in some other senses, I felt the apprenticeship was lacking in like the more traditional areas or like when I first got there was sort of like nothing for me to do.
Yep.
They sort of dropped me in. I don't think the other artists who were working sort of had much say in whether there was going to be an apprentice or not. So I kind of just was dropped on them. And in the first few months, you know, it was sort of awkward. Like, I don't know if they really wanted me there. I just tried to be as helpful as I could. Like, I didn't even draw. I would just try to clean a toilet or clean a windowsill or like do something every minute I was there to help.
Yeah, so you couldn't sit still and just focus on essentially what you should be doing, which is the art.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the first half of an apprenticeship is all about just sort of like making yourself useful to the studio. Because with tattoo artists, like they're sort of just being paid when they have the machine in hand. So if you can be around to like make their stencils or clean like their setup or help them in any way possible, like the more I did those things, the more they turned around and were like, oh, well, I have all this free time now. Do you want to sit down and learn how to do this?
And that's what you really want. That's you need to make those. And I guess like any job, you need to make the connections with the people so they'll be able to take the time for you. And they want to know that you're committed and you're not going to leave after a couple of weeks too.
Yeah, I think it's the best job I've had like that because I've done so many odd jobs before I got into tattooing. And I feel like every workplace I've been in, I've given 110%. Like even if it was like a shitty little door knocking job, I treated it like it was my full-time career. But I felt like the more energy I put in, the more they asked of me. Like I was always treated like you're just our slave. But when I did tattooing, it was like I put in so much energy and it was immediately reflected back to me. And I would even do something small like clean a bathroom and artists would be coming out going, oh, who did that? Like, good job. Like,
yeah. Validation.
Yeah.
So at this point in time, are you tattooed more yourself? Because I know that is an interesting one with people taking on apprenticeships and, you know, you shouldn't be judging people, but they do you have to look the part a little bit as well.
Yeah. I still didn't have many tattoos at that time. Like, I think if I had, I had tattoo artists that were really inspiring to me on my journey. So I remember like I traveled overseas to see Horiyoshi III and like get small tattoos here and there to just really cement like this is the path I want to be on. I want to meet the people who are sort of the forefathers of this path.
Yep.
But nothing super visible at that point.
Yeah. But I guess you had the metal look, which kind of gets you across the line there as well.
Yeah, and I think that was the first thing I connected with a lot of people on, was just like what was on the radio, or like that was sort of how I could have a conversation with other artists.
Yeah. And so as an apprentice at a shop, and you've got your own individual style, which is stemmed from your drawing, which is influenced by a bunch of different stuff. You're trying to tattoo that, but I guess you don't have that luxury as a apprentice. You sort of have to do whatever's thrown at you as far as tattooing skin.
Yeah, like I think I had sort of pre-prepared myself for that, because in my portfolio I had done so many different styles, because I just wanted to show that, like, yes, I'm interested in everything. And I sort of couldn't choose at that point. Like, I really had an interest in Japanese tattoo, but I didn't have the skill for it, and I was sort of still studying it. So I just tried to do anything. And once I started tattooing, it was just like all the little walk-ins that the other artists didn't want to do was my job.
Yeah, which I think happens for a lot of apprentices.
It's good, yeah. It's a good learning experience.
Yeah, I guess it makes you have to think on your feet and, tackle a lot of different tattoo styles, and you can't just be in your own little comfort zone.
Yeah, and I think one thing that my apprenticeship did really well was they really restrained me. Like when I started, it was like, you're just going to do small coin-sized silhouettes until your line art looks like, like not a prison tattoo. And that took almost a year. I was just doing silhouette after silhouette, and it was so boring, but I'm really glad.
Yeah, it's all part of the process, I guess. So you're still running obviously your Instagrams at this stage, and then are people reaching out to you and that when you start to show that you're tattooing and you're building some clients through that capacity?
Yeah, like I feel like when I started tattooing and I was doing free tattoos and then $20 tattoos, it was maybe like a really busy time for the industry as well, because I was constantly answering messages and booking people in.
Yeah, and is the shop letting you tattoo for $20 or for free? Are they letting you do that?
Yeah, so I had
That's
maybe
pretty
like
cool.
a year and a bit where I was just helping and cleaning, and then lockdowns happened as well, which extended things.
Yep.
But after the lockdowns, they put me on a machine and they were like, you're allowed to start doing things for free on your close friends and yourself. And then once I got slightly decent, they were like, all right, you can charge 20 per tattoo.
It's crazy to think $20 now doesn't even buy food. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, that was like the first time in my life I felt like I was rich. Yeah.
I did 2 tattoos. I got $40. I'm living it up. So at this point in time, you're starting to tattoo people. You're making a little bit of money, and you think, okay, this shop's good, but it's probably not where I want to stay forever. Or you think that it served its purpose and you wanted to grow as an artist.
Yeah, sort of a little bit of both. And like with the gender thing as well, I'd sort of like, I was so happy to finally have an apprenticeship, and that was all I wanted, that was all I would focus on. But as I sort of got more into it and comfortable, like this sort of gender questions in the background rose back up, and I started getting really upset about them again, and I just couldn't put it out of my mind. So it's sort of like that. Like I had thoughts of like, I'd really like to be in a place where I'm maybe connected to more genderqueer people, or I can like talk to them or be around them. And then just on the front of the shop, it was sort of like, I really want to be in a more traditional workplace. I don't know what more I can get from this place. Although it's sort of a difficult feeling, because like, even though you do work for free as an apprentice and you put so much work in, it is still a huge thing that the shop does for you to allow you to apprentice and get your career there.
Yeah. So how does an apprentice work for free for 2 years and live in a out of home, basically, in another city?
I had like, usually have a second job or a third job. And then like the place I was living in was like an absolute shack. So
Yeah, but so it's expected of you to spend 40 hours a week there and then work to actually live outside of that time.
yeah, and I actually think my position was fairly good, because they let me have like my 2 days off a week, or I think it was even 3 days, where I was able to do my second job.
Wow. Yeah, what an absolute grind though, like for people that want to get into that industry. And I know that that's the traditional way of doing it,
Yeah.
but you can see why people buy a machine on Amazon and then they just try and jump right in.
Yeah, I think sort of the Australian Tattooist Guild, from what I know, is fairly interested in this, because I think people are starting to realize, like, yes, the apprenticeship must focus around sort of proving how badly you want this job. And really, like, it shouldn't be an easy thing to do, but we're not doing ourselves a huge amount of favors by, like, you know, if there are people who really want to get into it, but they have a kid or they can't commit to that kind of schedule, yes, they are going to buy Amazon machines and start from home.
Yeah. And I guess there's got to be some sort of balancing act in the middle there where it can be fair for everybody, especially when it's so fucking expensive to live these days.
Yeah. And there's not really any, like, regulation on apprenticeships either. So if someone wanted to take advantage of that deal, or a shop owner is, like, less than moral and wants to have someone, you know, work for free for 2 years and then be like, oh, you're not a good fit, and fuck them off. Like,
yeah,
that can happen.
I have heard about that in certain scenarios where they say it's like an apprentice factory where they'll get people in, use them up and then spit them out. And that's definitely not cool.
Yeah. And I feel like in other countries, like, the common way is to pay for your apprenticeship. So I'm glad we're not at that stage. Like,
so they would say to you, we'll take you on, but you owe us 10 grand or something like that.
yeah, they would say you owe us such and such grand and you'll work for free, and it will be maybe 3 years before you get to do anything. Like,
yeah, that's fucked.
yeah.
So at this point in time, you left your previous employer where you did your apprenticeship.
Mm-hmm.
Do they kind of sign you off? Do they say, Imogen, you've done your time now, you're sort of free to go? How does something like that transpire?
It's always a little difficult leaving a place because tattoo shops are sort of just a little territorial by nature. I think things went pretty all right for me. Like, I tried to be as honest about it as I could, and I told them my feelings and why I want to leave. And I know that in the lead up to that, I was absolutely sweating. Like, I just didn't know what would happen. I thought, are they going to take all my stuff? Are they going to do worse? But I think the way I approached them really worked, because they were like, yeah, if you don't want to be here, you need to go. And that was fine.
And it wasn't anything personal towards the shop. It was more like you felt that there was probably some workplaces where you felt that you were going to be around more people like-minded or more accepting of who you wanted to be.
Yeah. Like, I remember I was sort of crying when I left that conversation, because I was worried it came off as really personal, but it really wasn't personal. It was just like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. So then I guess you take a little bit of a hiatus. You don't want to jump from one shop to another, so you take some time. Or how does it work? Or do you just jump straight in?
Yeah, I really needed to keep making money at that point, and I wanted to keep tattooing. So I had one place, JLab, who reached out to me and wanted me to do a guest spot. So I just jumped straight into that.
Straight into there. And then is that multiple guest spots you've done now, or you found your permanent home pretty quickly?
I did 2 guest spots before I found my current permanent home. And the other place was Green Lotus, who were super supportive and, like, really welcoming for, like, that point I was in at that time, where I was so nervous and scared that I would never get another job if I left. Or
Really? You were that worried about it because you didn't have enough experience under your belt?
Yeah, I didn't have a huge amount of experience. Yeah, it was a shame. It was like I really wanted to stay in one place and get as much experience as I could, but I also just felt instinctively that I needed to move. So when I left, I was like, surely no one will want to hire me. But there were heaps of places that were really encouraging. Even if they didn't have space for me, they were like, no, you'll definitely get a job. Just keep looking.
And from what I can gather, the greater tattoo community, everyone is pretty accepting and pretty, I'm sure there's competitive people out there, bit of tall poppy syndrome, but I think most people in general are pretty happy and cool and happy to accommodate people, especially for guest spots or just, make people feel welcome.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I feel all of us in this industry are a bit, we all have an experience of being an outcast, and if you show that you're really serious about this job and you're really interested in it, then people will treat you almost like family. It's really nice.
Yeah, we're all outcasts together, that sort of mentality.
Yeah, 100%.
Have you been back to Sydney to tattoo at all?
No, I would love to, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Do a guest spot or something in Sydney for a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, because all my family's down there, so I take the train and the bus down a bit, but I haven't actually set up to, like, take my tattoo things or get the license or...
Oh, so you need a different license to tattoo in a different city?
Yeah, I think it's in Queensland and Sydney, or like New South Wales, they have it.
Right, so it's just a whole different license than your Victorian tattoo license.
We don't even have a license here.
So you don't need, so anyone can just start tattooing at any point in time, professionally?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's sort of like the way they told me you're a tattooist is they just came in and they were like, all right, just charge full rates. And I was like, okay, so am I an apprentice anymore? And they were like, no.
So then you start to get, so then I guess every shop's different, but at that point you start to go, all right, well, I get half of this and I've got to give you half, or whatever the sort of deal is.
Yeah, every shop is different with that, definitely.
Yeah. What do you prefer? What is the like from an artist perspective, what kind of deal do you think is a fair and just one?
I mean, yeah, over half ideally, which you think would be the norm. But I feel like, yeah, I mean, it's good when you work for someone who is a tattoo artist themselves, because they've sort of got their own income that's invested in the same business you're in. And I think a situation, I guess it depends on what they're giving you, because some places, you know, they'll give you a lot of supplies for free, but then they'll ask for a slightly larger percentage. Or other places are like basically just pay rent and then whatever you make is yours.
Yeah, it's a hard one because I guess until you own the shop, you don't really think of all the, the insurance and overheads and everything that goes along with it. Which I guess when you think, oh, I've got to give them half, that's a big chunk, but a lot of it is going to that, you know.
Yeah, and I feel like I've had situations where I've been in an unfavorable percentage, and I've tried to talk about that. But at the end of the day, it is the shop's right to sort of conduct themselves how they think is the most fair for their business.
It's this, yeah, and I guess you don't know what goes on behind the scenes and how many overheads they've got and all the rest of it.
Yeah, it's sort of like, yeah, if it doesn't work for you, you can leave, but there's probably a reason they think that they should do it that way.
I guess it's a very competitive game, and there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of tattooists out there now, and I guess the mentality for some places would be, if you don't like what we're offering, you will find someone else.
Yeah, but I mean, then again, like tattooing is a little dry at the moment. Like everyone's going through a recession. It's really hard to get bookings. I guess we sort of have an influx of international artists in Melbourne, but at the same time, I think I've seen a few studios sort of struggle to get new people in or to get exciting things happening in their studio.
Yeah, and I guess in that capacity, it really helps when you've got your niche market, you've got your own artwork, original artwork that you can do, and then try and use that to, for lack of a better term, find new clients.
Yeah.
And that's been helpful for you?
Yeah, it's sort of hard for me to settle on what is my style because I still have that sort of interest in everything. But I mean, I've just been meeting a lot of people. I'm a bit nerdy, and like when I talk to my clients, sometimes we'll talk the whole session for like 7 hours straight, and like I think that's how I've been making a lot of long-term clients, is that we have a lot of overlapping interests in niche things.
Yeah, like music or just art, anime, whatever.
Yeah, I'm not such an anime person anymore, but definitely like music or shows or books or
that sort of thing. Yeah. So where did you eventually find your permanent home after leaving and doing a few guest spots?
So I'm in Fitzroy Tattoo now, which is run by Sam Coe, and I'm really happy in this spot, so I hope I will stay there for the indefinite future.
And a good crew there?
Yeah, it's really nice. It's sort of like has a really good crew, sort of like my apprenticeship where I really get along with the artists, and I have some, I guess I wouldn't say they're technically my mentors anymore, but they're definitely like people who've been in the trade a lot longer than me, and I've been learning from them a lot.
And that's the thing. When your apprenticeship's finished, it doesn't mean that you stop learning. You keep learning, and you've got to be like that. If you think you know fucking everything after a couple of years, you're probably not going to be the most well-rounded artist.
Yeah, definitely. And it's cool being in Fitzroy too, because I feel like it is a really queer area, and I've had a lot of clients. I guess I had one client the other day who, as soon as I met them, they were like, I'm really excited to be tattooed by another genderqueer person. And it sort of surprised me because it's not a huge thing I advertise on my page, but there are, the people who know, and they are very supportive.
Yeah. So that brings us back to that part of your life. So there you felt comfortable to tell your colleagues and your employer that you identify as non-binary?
Yeah, I would say like it's not a huge thing that comes up in my workplace, and I guess that's sort of like a privilege that I have, that I can be a bit of a chameleon and put those things aside until like my work day is done. But like I know when I was apprenticing, I was like, this is not really the place that I want to get into those feelings, and tried to ignore them again. And I guess how I came to being non-binary specifically is that like I was feeling so distressed about being female and presenting as female, but I still, for whatever reason, just didn't feel it was right to commit this full transition. And I was sort of fighting against being non-binary because I sort of, at this point, I knew what it was, but I was like, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, surely you're in the binary of either male or female. And if I'm not female, I must be male. Like, yeah.
So, but that's something that people have come to terms with recently, that they say you don't have to be one or the other. So, but you couldn't get your head around it yourself.
Yeah, I really struggled with it. I was like, I sort of had this mindset of like, either I'm just female and I'm causing this huge drama over nothing, even though this was just sort of happening in my head. Like, I wasn't making a drama about it, or my other thought was that like I'm male and, I'm too scared to commit to the transition and, I'll never be ready. And then sort of just got so distressed to the point where I was like, well, what if I just, talk to other non-binary people and join these communities and these subreddits and sort of see what it's about. And the more I learned about it and spoke to people, the more I was like, oh, I share a lot of these sentiments and I do feel the same way.
Yeah, so for people that might be feeling the same, where would they find these sort of communities online?
I find Reddit's really good for that because it has like really specific niche communities. Like even, in the case, I follow a lot of trans subreddits, and there's one for, say, like trans men who still present really feminine, and there's ones for trans men who are really masculine.
Yeah. So it's for someone who's not part of the community. It sounds like that's almost labels though. Do you know what I mean? Or is it just helping people find like-minded people?
Yeah, I feel like this is the most useful. I feel like this is the best way to use labels is to like sort of have this code that you can speak with similar communities and feel, oh, like, yes, there is sort of a precedent for the things I'm feeling and I'm not completely crazy.
Yeah. So it's using labels with a positive spin.
Yeah, I think it starts to become, and this is again like maybe the problem with Reddit as well, that it becomes an echo chamber, or it sort of becomes this constricting thing of like, well, I'm non-binary, so I use these pronouns, and if I ever change out of that mindset, then I must have just been faking it, or it was a phase, or...
Yeah, I think in any kind of social media or the internet, you can find yourself in an echo chamber, whether it's to do with that I liked a few plant things on Instagram, and now my whole feed is full of Monstera Deliciosa at the moment. Like, you can get yourself into this, the algorithm can take it down those paths. But I guess aside from the internet, you can now find communities, like you said, people that come in that are like-minded, and you can find real-life communities and people where you can sort of, learn off each other and kind of feel comfortable and learning about this sort of journey, because it is new for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, I feel like it's really interesting, specifically with non-binary people. It's really like broad definition. So there's a lot of people who sort of have this really strong feeling of like, I am non-binary and I don't identify with either binary category, and that is like my identity. Whereas I guess there's people who are similar to me and that like they almost fell into these communities because they were like struggling with the current binary they were in, or like, they wanted to fit a binary, but they don't. Or even some people who maybe they did commit a transition, but now they've detransitioned, but they don't still feel like they're assigned gender.
That's a whole thing in itself, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
Because obviously if anyone is going to go through the whole path of transitioning, that there's a lot, not only physical, but a lot of mental stuff that's going to happen there, and it's something you want to be really prepared for and not jump to any conclusions.
Yeah, and I feel like I know a lot of people sort of complain about the labels because they worry that it will influence people to pick up an identity really quickly and commit to it before they're ready. But in a sense, this can sort of be the solution to the problem of like, instead of, having really young people have these kind of feelings like I have and feel like, well, to be valid, I need to take testosterone and I need to start medically transitioning. There are communities out there that can say, well, there are other options to consider. Like, you don't have to make such a drastic change. You might actually be more comfortable with like this community.
Do you feel personally that if you grew up in say a day and age now, you're at school and you're in your teens and there was these things offered, do you think you would have gone down a little bit more permanent route, or do you think it was helpful for you to come to these conclusions in your adult sort of life?
It's hard to say. I think I've always felt like quite self-determined. Like, I don't ever want to do anything from pressure, or like, it's hard to convince me to do something I don't already want to do. So I think like, you know, even as an adult where it's very possible for me to go on a journey of like a medical transition, if it's not right for me, it's not right for me and I won't start it. And I have a feeling I would have been like that as a teenager as well. Like I feel like a lot of people sort of feel teens are really compulsive, which they are in some aspects, but I feel it's important to give them credit as well. Like people can make smart decisions about this thing.
Totally, and kids can make smart decisions. I made a lot of stupid decisions in my teenage years, and I just feel personally that a lot of kids probably, and some of them probably are in a sane spot and they are very mature. But a lot of people again have to you know take time to develop and sort of figure out their place in the world, and you know maturity. It's something you can't learn. You know, you can over time.
Yeah, it's really hard because there's not sort of like a standard level for everyone.
Yeah.
I think like from what I know about like the statistics of transitioning, that where it seems like, you know, the world is in a pretty good place with it at the moment compared to what people may think. Like the statistics of people who detransition or who feel severely unhappy about their transition process are quite low.
Yep.
And they definitely exist because I've been in detransition communities as well because I wanted to hear what they have to say. But I think it can get overblown in a lot of cases, or people feel that like transitioning is some kind of new social movement that's now like forcing people into it.
Yeah. So do you find the people that you come across that are detransitioners, is that the correct term?
Yeah, I guess like detrans people.
Are they vocal? Are they out there trying to tell people this happened to me, or are they trying to spread the concern for other people that may not have gone down that may be thinking about it? You know what I mean? That's why you're obviously in those forums.
I've come across both. Like I've come across both in my experience an equal amount. There are communities that are really like an echo chamber of depression where people are like, I wish I didn't transition. I'll be disfigured for life. You know, I wish this wasn't pushed on me. These people are really in a dark place about it.
Yep.
But there's also a lot of detrans communities where people are like, I love the trans community. I don't regret a second of it. You know, I'm happy on my detransitioning journey. And I think there's even a lot of detrans people who still identify somewhere outside of like their original position as cisgendered, but are still quite close to the community and quite loving. And
it's a lot to sort of take in for somebody who would potentially be looking at transitioning, and I guess you could end up in a positive, you know, echo chamber or a negative one, but you got to try and find somewhere in the middle where I guess you for your own personal journey where you think it's going to lie.
Yeah, and I feel like it's hard on the internet. I think like in person, the people I've spoken to about it, there's sort of like there's this common theme of like no one sort of just woke up and made these decisions. A lot of these people have gone through this process for a long time or had these thoughts for a long time, and it's been a really slow process or a slow change. But I think on the internet, I guess we see this representation of like really quick movements or quick changes.
Yeah. And I guess for some of these detransition people, they might have gone through their transition, been depressed previously, done it.
Yes.
And I guess there's no quick fix to anything. In their head, they're still not happy. And that may not be anything to do with their gender. That might just be their own mental health, you know?
Yeah. I mean, we have this problem with any kind of medication. And I know friends who like through taking antipsychotics or antidepressant medication, it's had a severe long-term effect on the way their brain works, and they do regret taking that medication.
Yeah.
And I have a friend who like, she can't read books anymore, and her life completely flipped from just this short period of taking an antidepressant.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, she still has that condition that requires some kind of medication, but that process really changed her.
Yeah. And that I'm sure that there's side effects to all sorts of medications. So why is that going to be any different?
Yeah. It's a really hard topic, and I feel like the shame is that a lot of these people who are becoming very public debating these issues are people who are sort of emotionally disconnected from them. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like you see a lot of conservative talkers who like they don't really have high stakes in this issue. Like they're not trans themselves, and whether or not trans people have rights or have access to medical care is not really an emotional problem for them. So they're able to take this sort of logical, detached stance, and you see them debating people who, for them, it's like debating their life or death.
Yeah.
It's not really fair.
Yeah, when it's got no bearing on them, and this is the whole thing that why do you care so much about how somebody else lives their life? If they're not imposing their life on you, how does it fucking bother you? And that's the thing that I can't quite get my head around.
Yeah, it's hard. I remember when I first started having these thoughts really seriously, I called up my parents and sort of just casually mentioned it to them. Like, I'm not doing anything, like, I'm not making any decisions, but I just want you to know where I'm at and how I feel. And my dad, like, bless him, he was really supportive, but he also started sending me a lot of sort of what I believe is a lot of transphobic books written by radical feminists and things like this. Just because from his view, he was like, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And I think a lot of these books were written by like parents of trans children and sort of people who, for their own reason, I guess, have a really strong concern but don't really understand where their kids are coming from.
Yeah, and they can only be a parent in that situation. They don't know what's going through in their kid's head, you know? They don't know what's... Yeah, so that's kind of... I understand what your dad's trying to do, but I guess... Did you humour him and read the books?
I did, yeah. Like,
well, at least you did, yeah.
That's like my dad is, I guess he's not afraid to be controversial. He doesn't give a shit about that. So I don't think he was trying to offend me. I think he was just like, this is what I think.
Yeah.
And I did have a back and forth with him. And yeah, he's still been really respectful of me, but I think it's still a struggle for him to understand.
So obviously you're somebody who's done a lot of research. So could you break it down for somebody who is biologically female? If you were going to go through the whole transition process, is there like medical sort of psychological tests, or is there safe measures in place for people that do this, that they're going to do it and do it in a safe mental state?
Yeah, as far as I know, because I've never gone into a doctor to speak about this and I haven't gone down that path myself. But from what I know, it's not easy for people to jump into this. Like, there are checks and there are lots of forms you have to read and you have to be really informed on the side effects.
Yep.
So I know in the case of trans men, like, there's been this phenomena of lots of detrans people coming online and saying like, I didn't know I would go bald. I lost all my hair. And it's like, these are the things you're forced to read about before you commit to a transition, because you have to know all the possible side effects.
Yeah. So there's safeguards that, like, if you do, during this process, you will see psychologists and all that sort of thing. Is there processes? Because I feel like it's a lot for people to take on.
Yeah, I believe so. I'm actually not sure if it's like, I'm not sure what the deal with psychologists is. I know that a lot of people probably get into it through speaking to their psychologists about this and then having like a related GP. But
yeah. And I'm guessing it would be an expensive process as well.
Yeah, I'm not even sure about that, to be honest. Like, I do know there's like different dosage levels, specifically with hormones, like that a lot of people will start on a really low dose and sort of ease their way into it. Because again, everyone's different. Like, someone could take a low dose and start growing a beard immediately. And another person could take a higher dose and have a really like years long to see any changes.
Yeah, I guess it's like anybody. Some people, I've got friends that are older than me, can't grow any facial hair. So it depends on the individual.
Yeah, and I feel like, again, like going to a girls' school, you come into contact with lots of girls who have like PCOS and stuff like that, and that can cause people to have facial hair or things like this.
I'm not familiar with that term. Can you tell us what it was?
Polycystic ovarian syndrome, I believe.
Okay.
It's I think it's meant to be uncommon, but it's weird how many people I know who have this condition.
And that causes them to grow facial hair?
I mean, in some cases, it's really just like, it's a problem with the ovaries. So I think like the main symptoms I know that my friends have is like severe pain during menstruating and stuff like that. But I think it can also cause hormonal imbalances, which can cause like the hair or like weird periods or stuff like that.
Yeah, wow. I'm learning a lot of stuff today. Let's move back to your personal journey and artistic. So in the future now, looking forward, you want to keep doing the kind of tattoos that your kind of art that you're doing, or are you still wanting to learn and sort of push yourself down different routes, or do you want to stay in your sort of niche?
I definitely want to keep learning. Especially in regards to traditional styles. Like, I really want to start focusing heavily on like learning from other people's work and references, but at the same time, I'm sort of like, now that I'm comfortable with like, I guess the physical process of tattooing, I'm in a kind of nostalgic phase where I'm thinking a lot about my past and my identity and how I want to bring that into my work as well.
Yeah. And your workload, is that mostly original stuff, or are you still doing the kind of everyday tattoos here and there?
I guess it's a good mix at the moment. Like, again, things are pretty dry right now. So it's not like I have, like when I started and I'm just constantly booking people, but I feel like I have a really nice balance right now. Like I do your everyday walk-ins to pass the time, and then I get a really big project I'm really excited about, and then maybe I have like a week of recovery mentally, and then get another project I can really get interested in.
Yeah. And aside from the tattooing, you're still doing your own Imogen Schlgrl train wreck stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing a lot of stuff on TikTok at the moment. I've always been doing like weird stuff, I guess I would say, on the net. Like I used to be a live streamer before I was a tattooist.
Let's break that down for us. What kind of live streaming?
I was working at a modeling agency in Sydney a while ago for a couple of years. And through this agency, I got contracted to be a streamer on an app called Bigo that was sort of from China, and they were pushing it in the West. And I got a job being a live streamer on there. And I sort of just did anything. Like some days I would stream for a long time and I would either just be talking, or I would play music, or I would like read stories, or just whatever, cook. And I got fairly big. Like I think I got 80K audience at some point.
That's during one live stream?
No, this is
That's
just like my following.
Followers, right, okay. I'm not familiar with the, with the platform, that's all.
No one is. It's like a really obscure platform.
Yeah. So it was like it was like an early iteration of TikTok, kind of?
It's it's sort of what TikTok is trying to be now, where they're trying to push live streamers.
Yep.
Because on this platform, like I had sort of my own profile, which I would stream from daily, but I would also be involved in like worldwide events. So they would have like streaming events or competitions where they would like link you up to a bigger stream with like a huge audience.
And that, I guess, in turn builds your fan base and your core audience as well.
Yes. And because it sort of was like, it got a little crazy, like this app. Well, I guess the reason I got contracted on it was they wanted more personalities in Australia to be streaming, but it sort of had this undercurrent of like the way you would make your money on the app was for people to make donations or send you gifts. So it was really important to have your own identity and to have sort of this legion of like loyal followers who would gift you things.
Yeah, which is for someone I'm in my 40s, it's a hard thing to get your head around now.
Yes.
Like the younger kids, it's normal for them, but for the older guard, it is something that's hard to understand. Like, but I guess it's becoming more and more normal.
Yeah, and I think it's really profitable for social apps, and they've cottoned onto that because they'll take a huge cut of all the money that goes through the app. So you'll see a lot of, I mean, this is my theory, you'll see a lot of apps like TikTok or Instagram or people who are going to start pushing live streams more and more.
Yeah. I built like a small following of 15,000 on TikTok, and I tried to roll that into the podcast here, and it just didn't work at all.
Yeah.
It's just like sometimes you'll get an audience for some things and you try and leverage out of it and it just doesn't seem to work. So what are you doing on TikTok now? What is working?
It's hard to say. Like TikTok's changed a lot in the time that I've used it. Like I feel like I have a fairly decent audience on there. But it's weird. Like I can never tell what's going to work anymore. Sometimes like you'll get a video and it will get like 3-point-something million views and you're like, okay, this is what people want to see. And you'll try to put out something else like that and it gets like 200 views.
Yeah, I can never get my head around the algorithm. I think it's like it has to pop off really quickly to get on the For You page, and then it's just got to keep going. People got to share it. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's something I learned from live streaming is like you can really get so in your head about like succeeding on the algorithm. And I know at least when I was live streaming, there was sort of this company behind me who was really pushing me and saying like, okay, you didn't meet your targets this month. You need to get more donations. You need more views.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm trying, but I can't make people follow me and view all my stuff.
Yeah, I think that's the whole thing with these sort of social platforms. You can try your hardest to do whatever, but it's usually the things that you don't think will work that do work, and the stuff that you put all the time and effort into just flops. And I don't know how that works, but it seems to happen a lot.
It almost becomes like a bit spiritual, hey, because you're like, I can't put too much effort into this. I have to release it at this specific time. For me, I'm like, I can't open the app and keep checking, otherwise that'll like
Yeah,
do
that
something.
does. I reckon that does make a difference. They want you to see all those little notifications come up and drag you back in.
Yeah. And this is how it relates to my streaming as well. They had a really interesting way of doing that. Like, the notifications they would use to get people to view their app were sort of a little sleazy, in my opinion. Like, I sort of had a stream where I didn't do anything sexual, or like I didn't have that kind of relationship with my followers. Like, most of the people on there would sort of like, they were lonely people, and for them it was like a friend. Like, we would talk or cook together or whatever. But they would send these notifications to people's phone being like, you know, Imogen's streaming, and it would say things like, I really want a boyfriend, or like, I'm about to tell a dirty secret, like, jump on my live. And I was so shocked by this. I remember asking the company, like, are you advertising me in this way? And they said, no. And one of my followers started screenshotting all these notifications that came up for him and send them to me, and was like, are you writing these? Or
Yeah, and so and that was the end of that, or you yeah.
Yeah, I got really emotional about it, like, because I just felt like there was such a pressure, and at that point it became my main income. So on months I'd do really well, it was fine, but on months where like things were dry, that started to affect my personal life.
Yeah.
And I remember I sort of had a breaking point where like some of the people in my live I would live stream every day, sometimes twice a day, and there were people who were on every single stream for almost a year. So they were basically like, they felt like they were part of my life.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, and they had given me a lot of things and stuff like that, even though I never asked for it, although they wanted me to. But it was just like a moment where like I said a joke or something on stream and someone took it really personally, and they were going off on me, and they were like, I hate you, you know, you've ruined my life. I can't believe you would say this. And the day after, they messaged me and they were like, I'm so sorry, that was out of line.
Yeah.
But just having that emotional weight on me, I was like, I need to quit now, because...
But also, being somebody who obviously has decent morals, just to accept things from strangers over and over again and playing on their insecurities and potentially the fact that they don't have much of a social life is a pretty fucking sad game.
It is. It doesn't feel good. And it's like, that's why I guess I always tried to never be that person. Like, I never tried to offer things to like make people subscribe or give me things. And I would always say like, you know, don't give me anything. Like, if you want to, you can. Like, I guess because I do a lot of competitions where they would rank you by how many gifts you got. And I'd have followers who would really want me to win. But I never felt comfortable to beg or be like, let's win this, guys. I guess I just try to be really casual about it.
Yeah.
But I always felt like I owed people because of that. So I'd try to be more entertaining, or I'd try to upgrade my setup, or I'd try to like be online more. And I would be in personal messages with people and try to like give them their money's worth as a friend. But at the end of the day, after that situation, I realized I actually don't know these people. Like, they're not my personal friends.
No, and you've built a community, but at the end of the day, they're your customers. So.
Yeah. And I think a weird thing that happened is, I mean, I guess this streaming platform was branching out and trying all these things. And at one point, they wanted me to sort of act as a counselor to my followers. And I was like, I really don't know how to do that.
No, does that platform still exist?
I don't know. I don't know if it exists in the same way it did. Yeah. Like, and I don't want to say too much shit on them, because like, obviously the things I was told may have been from someone who doesn't even work there anymore. Like, it's not like I was speaking to the owner all the time.
Yeah.
But I just think, like you said, that's sort of the nature of these streaming things, that at the end of the day, if they can monetize people's loneliness or people's need for connection, they will.
Yeah, and look, I understand that that's the way that a lot of these services are going.
Yeah.
But like, even just with this channel, once you get 1,000 subscribers, it says now you can accept gifts or whatever, and I'm like, that doesn't seem right. Like, you know, like... And
it's like, what are you meant to do? Like, I know on stream, it would do a big announcement if someone sent something big. I remember someone sent me something that was worth like $300. And I was like, well, I don't want to sit there and be like, you shouldn't have done that. So I was like, wow, thank you, yada, yada. But then you're like, am I encouraging it too much or?
Yeah. And then I'm guessing the platform takes a huge slice of that.
Huge slice. Like I would say 70%. Yeah.
Really?
Easily.
Right. And they think they're being really nice and giving you something cool and you're only getting, well, he's still getting $50 or whatever, but like that's,
Yeah, and that's the kind of language I don't like with a lot of like now current apps like TikTok or Instagram where they're saying start live streaming and like get an income today. It's sort of the nice way of saying like the people who are going to be funding all that money like are those kind of people.
Yeah. Unless you've got a core audience and you can get the sponsors involved, but then you're still kind of using them in a different capacity.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of the hard thing of like I guess the idealized way they put this forward is like we're putting the money into the people's hands, like work your own job, make your own destiny, but that puts more onus on the people to supply the money and to supply the business.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, they're probably people sitting there pretty lonely on their phone at home at night and they just want some companionship. So it is a bit of a sad cycle.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel like sometimes I really miss the people from those days because I had like generally a lot of really funny people in my stream who were really fun to talk to.
From all over the world?
Yeah.
So now on TikTok, what kind of content are you putting out?
Oh, yeah. I guess like I'm trying to put a lot of stuff that relates to tattooing because that's what I do. But I get distracted so easily and I try not to take it too seriously. Like I'll put up memes I made or like just stupid things. I don't know. If I think it's funny, I'll put it up. And sometimes that'll have a good effect. Like a lot of people will agree and then start liking all my tattoo posts.
Yeah, well, I guess it's a good way to just find new clients and build new followers. Do you go do the live things on TikTok as well?
Nah, I'm really not about any live things because as soon as I switch on the camera, I feel like I revert into that personality I had when I had to work for my money as a streamer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a funny place, the TikTok live thing. Like you said, people go live and they're not really doing anything. You're like, fuck, what are we watching? And it's, what's bizarre? Those people that battle each other, I'm like, what are they, they get two people.
That's what I used to do.
Yeah.
Not on TikTok, but yeah, the battles.
That's a crazy, like I just can't get my head around that. I guess I'm just too old.
No, it is really weird. Like as the person who used to do it, it's so fucking strange. Yeah. And I remember they would always hook me up with people who would like twerk on battle and stuff. And I'd just be sitting there like, so am I going to watch this person twerk for 10 minutes or like, I'm not going to join in.
But what are you supposed to do? I see some pop up, like maybe it's like through a hip hop thing and they're just like having a go at each other. And I'm like, this is weird. So toxic. Like it's just so bad. And you're getting people applauding them for you just calling someone else a dickhead over and over.
Really? So they're like roasting each other? Or?
Sort of, but in an awkward way. I don't know. It seems really sort of toxic. Anyway, so if people do want to follow you on TikTok, on Instagram, or in any of those capacities, how would they find you?
I think my tag for everything should be Schlgrl without the vowels. So SCHGRL and then an underscore.
On everything?
Well, from there it links to like I've got a personal art profile and a personal life profile, but they're like linked in the bio. If you see the Schlgrl tag, that's usually like my main business accounts.
There you go. And if they want to get a tattoo from you, where can they find you?
Probably the best way is to like contact me through one of those pages. Like usually people will message my Instagram or just walk into Fitzroy Tattoo.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing now with the way that people generally have a lot of their own clients with tattoo shops. Most people are booking their own through Instagram or through their own sort of personal avenues. I guess you're getting walk-ins a bit as well, but that is a trend and something, a way that Instagram's totally changed tattooing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I set up an email on my card, like Schlgrl Tats, but I check it once a month and I have never gotten any inquiries via email.
Instagram really does, for communication and for people as far as creatives communicating, it is probably the best platform. It's awesome like that.
Yeah, I think Instagram's cool at the moment where it's like the algorithm's a bit fucked, so there's no point trying to like make it big or try to force it. I think the best use for Instagram right now is just to have your portfolio up there and have your page, and the people who want to find you can find you there.
Yeah, and then the whole ad system is cooked on there as well. So you've really got to go looking for what you want and looking, and like I'll log on and find that it's just ad. And I'm like, where are all these posts of my friends or people I'm following?
Yeah. I think it's weird like that with TikTok too. Like sometimes I've even seen big creators on there ask their followers not to follow them if you like their content. Because sometimes when you follow a page, you start to see a lot less of them.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a fucking strange place we're in where you're asking people to unfollow you so they'll see more of your stuff.
Yeah.
So soon we'll be going like and unsubscribe. That's what people are going to say.
I mean, everyone has their sort of like, it's like gambling. Everyone has their beliefs about what's going to win big. So if you think that like, you know, my followers, if they don't follow me and they engage in all my content, but don't spam like, then I'll be successful. Yeah.
I haven't even come to terms with asking people to like and follow. So I've got a lot to learn in this internet stuff.
No, just be yourself, because I think most people don't know what cracks the code. It's sort of just like success bias where you see one person is successful and they're like, well, this is what I did.
100%, and I think that one thing you can tell with social media is people that are genuine and authentic. And if you are yourself, I think that comes out. And people that are trying to do something just to gain popularity or because they think it's going to be the right idea, you can see through that stuff.
Yeah, and I don't think that even works anymore. Like, I think you can get views off controversy, but it's not the kind of like views that you used to get maybe in the early 2000s or...
And those people don't stick around. You know, they're onto something else the next day.
Yeah.
So aside from the tattooing, are there any other sort of visual projects you're working on?
Yeah. I've sort of like had a lot of time recently to focus on a lot of my own personal projects. In like when I was a kid and I used to sort of make all these characters and worlds to process things around me, I've sort of picked that up again as an adult, and it's been really cool to revisit. So I've started making like little comics and stuff on the side.
And what's the plan for those? To release them to the world?
Yeah. So they're not like super refined quality. So I think when I first moved to Melbourne, I actually went to a big zine fair and I got really, really inspired by all the work there because it was like this huge diverse range from people who just like done napkin sketches and put it in a huge book.
Is that the sticky one?
I can't remember.
Sticky Institute, they do that song. Yeah, anyway.
It might have been, yeah. It was like maybe 4 or 5 years before the lockdowns when I went.
Yep.
And there was, in particular, there was this comic I started writing when I was about 18 and I was going through like a really turbulent time in my life. And I guess like I was going through this really turbulent time and I was also like a severe insomniac, so I wasn't sleeping and like things were really jumbled up for me, and I just started making this story, I guess.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us what it's called?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like what's the best way to approach it. Like the story itself is called Super Happy Funland.
Amazing.
Yeah. And it's sort of like explored a lot of this gender stuff we talked about, I guess. It's when I originally wrote it, it was a really simple story. It was like sort of this self-insert character I had, and I became friends with all the metal musicians who were influential to me growing up and created this machine that would turn me into a man. And then from there, basically, it just unravels and all these crazy adventures happen.
So it's sort of semi-autobiographical fantasy kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know, it's sort of like, it's a story that kind of takes place in this really dissociated reality, which takes parts of my life and parts of my influences and my experiences, but puts them in this totally fantastical setting. And when I first wrote it, I guess I was like, this is really immature and weird, and I kind of dropped off it. And then as an adult, I picked it back up and I was like, this is really sweet that I wrote this thing for myself as like this really comforting world that I could feel safe in and I could explore my feelings in. And so I've tried to, with my partner's help, because he's studying film and screenwriting,
Yep.
I've turned it into an actual story and started like fleshing it out.
So it's going to be in print form or in video media, or how are we going to be consuming this?
Yes, now that I'm saying it in words, I have to complete it. It will be in print form. I really want to complete it and make it into a really cheap zine because I don't want this to be a thing that I have to worry about as like a profitable part of my business.
Yep.
I really just want to make it sort of as efficiently and cheaply as possible materials-wise, just so I can have the story out there and then start selling it from my online shop.
Yeah, nice. Awesome. And what about some other sort of, is there any plans now that we're allowed to travel to head overseas or anything like that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I really want to do overseas guest spots in the future. Like, my first thought was Japan because I speak Japanese.
Oh, wow.
And I have some friends there, so I really wanted to like work there. But with tattooing in Japan, it's really difficult. Like, I think if I know correctly, it's only just become sort of legal to do it there. And
Even with
for
all the traditional Japanese tattoos and stuff?
yeah, like they've got a super interesting history with that because it's sort of had this really criminal representation there for a while, and there were parts of like Japanese tattoo history where it was perhaps like illegal for citizens themselves to get tattooed, but they still had this sort of trade with the sailors coming in, so they would tattoo sailors. So it was almost like, from what I read at least, that foreign people were getting tattooed in Japan more than like, you know, the regular citizen.
Wow. So it's just over there, it's just sort of a bit taboo, or it has been in the past and it's changing.
Yeah, it's super associated with the Yakuza gangs there. And like when I speak to friends and they're like, this is crazy, you got so many tattoos. And like always they'll bring up like, you know, it's like Yakuza. Like that's how they think of it.
Yeah, wow. But that you're still going to give it a go and go over there and try and tattoo?
I would love to. Like, you know, if I can do it the way with a visa, that would obviously be the most straightforward way. But as far as I know, there's no visa that denotes for like tattooing in Japan.
Yep. And what about besides Japan? Anywhere else that you'd like to take your work?
Yeah, I think like London and Italy would be two spots because I have a friend who's working in the studio at the moment who knows, like he's from Italy and he's mentioned some good places for me to go. But also London, because we've just got so many people from London in our studio at the moment. And I know that my partner Hamish used to live there and have like heaps of tattoos, tattoo artists I admire there. So
That'd be cool for sure.
yeah, it would be so nice to go, but I feel it would be a little bit overwhelming. Yeah.
London's a lot, yeah.
Yeah. It's just like obviously Melbourne has such a good talent pool, but it's just a bigger place, hey?
But just out on the streets and the tube and everything, it's a pretty hectic place, London in general.
I had never been there, so.
I'm sure you'll find out. Imogen, do you want to tell us what else is coming up for you in 2024 before we wrap things up and potentially have another beer?
Yeah. Yes. I don't know. I feel like I've just been through such a big weekend with the Inked Expo. That
Good crew there.
yeah, oh, it was just so nice, like meeting all the other tattooists. Everyone was super supportive. I guess I've just sort of been recovering from that. And what I think for the future, like I'm in such a good position now and I've sort of got all my ducks lined up. I don't know. I'm kind of just enjoying it. I think I would really like to start doing guest spots, like you said, to Sydney or overseas as well.
Yep.
So now that I'm comfortable, maybe, yeah, I'll start organizing those things.
Sounds awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming, making the journey down here. We'll wrap things up and have another beer. I think you're empty there as well.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was really fun.
Cheers.
3,000.